The labels that don't mean what you think. Start with this: in the US, natural on most foods has no binding federal definition. The FDA has offered non-binding guidance. Basically, don't add artificial colors, flavors, or synthetic substances, and don't mess with the food in a way that would not normally be expected. But guidance isn't law. There's no mandatory pre-approval, no consistent enforcement, and plenty of wiggle room for ingredients and processes that don't read as synthetic to a consumer but still rely on industrial chemistry. The USDA touches natural only for meat and poultry, and even there it usually means minimally processed, no artificial ingredients, not healthier, not pesticide-free, not clean. Now compare that with organic. That's a legally defined program run by the USDA's National Organic Program. But here's the catch. The front-of-pack headline, organic, is really 3 different categories with very different rules. If it says 100% organic, everything agricultural inside, aside from water and salt, must be certified organic. If it says just organic, at least 95% of the agricultural ingredients must be certified organic, with the remaining 5% pulled from a specific allowance list. And if it says made with organic, you're looking at a 70% threshold, still regulated, but with wider latitude for non-organic ingredients and processing aids. Processing aids are where a lot of confusion slips through. If an anti-foaming agent never ends up as a functional ingredient in the final product, it often doesn't have to be listed on the label. Same with certain enzymes and filtration aids used to make a texture work or a line run fast. Consumers never see them, but they can shape how organic foods are manufactured at scale. Even in the 95% organic category, the other 5% can include non-organic vitamins, minerals, or additives from a national list. They're for technical reasons, not because they're natural in any common-sense way. Then there's natural flavors. That phrase has a legal definition, yet it covers a lot. A natural flavor can be derived from a plant or animal source, but the extraction can involve solvents and carriers that don't show up on the ingredient list unless they're allergens. The flavor compound can be chemically identical to something artificial, and you'd never know. Shoppers see natural flavor and think real fruit. Often, it's a lab-built distillate that reads as strawberry because it's engineered to be strawberry. None of that violates the rules, but it clashes with what many people think they're buying. So why do these words move product? Because they tap into trust. For more than a decade, consumer surveys have shown that natural signals healthier and safer, even though regulators haven't anchored the term to clear, enforceable standards across the board. Organic triggers its own halo: fewer synthetic pesticides, no GMOs, better animal welfare. Some of that is true, especially at the farm level, but the halo travels farther than the law. The organic standard is primarily an agricultural standard. It says a lot about how crops are grown and animals are raised. It says far less about how a cereal is extruded, a bar is bound together, or a snack is engineered to stay crisp for 9 months. Here's where the sections of the rulebook matter. The Organic Foods Production Act defines the philosophy and outlines the guardrails. The USDA codifies them, accredits certifiers, and maintains the national list, the ingredients and processing aids allowed in organic products under certain conditions. That list is not static. Industry petitions it, stakeholders argue over it, and the National Organic Standards Board weighs in. Over time, technical allowances creep in to solve specific manufacturing problems: stability, texture, nutrient fortification. Each one has a rationale. Taken together, they help big organic scale. They also widen the gap between the farm story on the box and what happens inside the plant. Meanwhile, natural remains the wild card. The FDA asked for public comment years ago on whether to define it. Thousands of comments poured in and then nothing concrete. Companies self-police or they don't. Class action lawsuits pop up, and many end in settlements that tweak wording without changing formulas. Brands avoid the word to dodge risk, or they lean into it because it still sells. Either way, the shopper's mental model, no chemicals, healthier, simple, doesn't line up with how the system actually works. Let's make it practical. Pick up a granola that says made with organic oats. That means at least 70% of the total ingredients by weight, excluding water and salt, are certified organic. The sweeteners, oils, or crisps might be non-organic if they're within the remaining 30% and compliant. Flip to a 95% organic granola. Now the oils might need to be organic too, but that last 5% can include certain non-organic vitamins or emulsifiers from the national list. Both can say organic somewhere on the box. They are not the same thing, and none of that touches nutrition. An organic cookie is still a cookie, refined sugar, refined starch, shelf-stable fats. If 95% of the agricultural ingredients are organic, it earns the seal. It can still be ultra-processed. The label explains how it was farmed, not how your metabolism will respond. That difference, farm standard versus health promise, is the crack where most disappointment happens. People pay a premium, expect better outcomes, and sometimes feel nothing changed. So when the 100% natural snack disappears in Europe but stays here, it's not a contradiction, it's two different systems. In the US, natural doesn't lock a product to a codified standard the way organic does, and even organic has allowances that shoppers don't see. Those words didn't drift onto packages by chance. They were chosen because they work. To see why, we have to look at who helped write the rules and who benefits when they stay blurry. How big food shaped the rules. While shoppers were learning the vocabulary, trade groups were writing the dictionary. In Washington, label language doesn't arrive by press release. It moves through comment periods, petitions, and technical panels stacked with people who live and breathe supply chains. When the FDA floated questions about defining natural, the docket filled with polished submissions from food manufacturers arguing for flexibility. Keep natural broad, tie it to absence of artificial colors and flavors, avoid process-based bans that would confuse consumers. Public health comments asked for clarity, industry asked for room to maneuver. Guess which one came with data, commissioned surveys, and economic model? Follow the path money takes. A company doesn't walk into the USDA National Organic Program and ask for permission to use a specific emulsifier. It funds a consortium, hires consultants, and files a petition to place that substance on the national list with a technical review. The review is real, chemistry, agronomic need alternatives, but the narrative is framed. Without this aid, bread collapses, yogurt weeps, infant formula separate. The question shifts from should this exist in organic to can we produce enough organic at scale without it? When the answer points to shortages, price spikes, or safety concerns, allowances get traction. Meanwhile, front groups play professor. Centers and alliances with neutral names produce white papers explaining why a narrow definition of natural would eliminate time-honored methods and why organic-compatible inputs are essential to food safety. You see references to consumer preference studies that surprise, show people don't want higher prices or shorter shelf lives. Behind those studies, PR firms and trade associations you'd recognize if you traced the tax filing. None of this is illegal. It's how modern regulation happens, through volume, expertise, and well-timed fear of scarcity. Now layer in the revolving door. A policy analyst at an agency spends years learning the weeds of food standards. A few months after leaving, they're advising a certification body or a multinational on how to pass audits, how to frame a petition, how to anticipate objections from the National Organic Standards Board. They don't break rules, they translate them. The same happens in reverse. Industry scientists rotate onto advisory panels as stakeholders to ensure practicality. Practicality is the word that moves mountains. It turns ideals into checklists. Here's a micro story. A former organic inspector told me about a grain handler whose paperwork lined up but whose volumes felt optimistic. The inspector asked for more traceability. A manager pulled them aside. Be practical, we're feeding a national program. The inspector wrote the concern. The certifier asked for corrective actions. The operation kept its certificate. Months later, cheap organic grain flooded the market from that corridor. Was that fraud? The courts say yes in some cases. But in the moment, the system treated it as a paperwork problem to fix, not a scheme to stop. The tobacco playbook shows up in tone, not tar. When independent nutrition scientists began grouping ultra-processed foods as a risk category, the response came fast. Reframe the debate around individual nutrients and personal responsibility. Fund research that finds no difference when calories and macros are controlled. Argue that processing is a spectrum and many processed foods are essential. Swap cigarettes for convenience foods. And the tactics rhyme: undercut consensus, amplify uncertainty, defend the category. On labels, that means pushing for absence claims, no artificial flavors, rather than positive disclosures about processing methods. Comment periods are where the sausage is made. For the 2015-2016 FDA request for comments on natural, thousands of submissions landed. Many consumers asked the agency to ban GMOs under natural and to include animals raised with antibiotics. Industry argued that natural should not police genetic techniques or farming practices, only the formulation. Without a binding definition, lawsuits surged. Settlements nudged wording, all natural became simply made, but formulas didn't necessarily change. The ambiguity created both marketing power and legal risk, and the biggest players could afford both. On the organic side, the national list grew in the gray areas. Nutrient fortifications for baby foods, processing aids for wine, cellulose to keep shredded cheese from clumping, potassium citrate for acidity control. Each allowance had a sunset review, public debate, and a reason. Taken one by one, they solved a problem. Together, they built an industrial organic that could sit on a truck for days and on a shelf for months. The farm standard remained strict. The factory standard got more technical and less visible. Meanwhile, importers and brokers pressed for lighter oversight to keep supply flowing. Certifiers overseas varied in rigor. Domestic farmers watched prices sink when suspiciously cheap organic shipments arrived. Advocacy groups begged USDA to tighten the net. It took years and headlines about multi-million-dollar grain fraud for the agency to issue its strengthening organic enforcement rule, which finally required certification for more handlers and brokers, deeper audits, and better traceability. Notice the pattern. Enforcement followed exposure, not the other way around. The result is a rulebook shaped by two forces that rarely align: the idealism of organic pioneers and the logistics of feeding a continent. Industry didn't just adapt to those rules, it helped write them, carefully, strategically, and always with an eye on price, shelf life, and market growth. While shoppers held onto words like natural and organic, the definitions behind them moved inch by inch toward what the system could deliver at scale. The price of a halo. Walk down any aisle and you can spot the halo from 10 feet away: muted greens, craft paper browns, a hand-drawn leaf. That look commands a premium. Over the last decade, organic and natural created a tier of food where the same shelf space earns higher margins because the story on the box adds value. Retailers love it because it lifts the whole category. Brands love it because it turns commodities into identity. And shoppers, convinced they're buying a safer path, pay more without seeing what the money is actually buying. Here's how the premium gets built. First, marketing wraps a farm philosophy around a processed product. A cereal box shows dew on oats, not an extruder. A snack talks about soil health, not anti-foaming agents. Second, price anchors shift. Once a shopper accepts that organic means better inputs, the brand nudges a 50-cent spread into $1, then $1 into $2. The edges feel justified, pesticides avoided, animals treated better, ecosystems protected. Some of that is real, but the halo also covers the basic business math. Higher gross margins fund higher trade, spend to keep the halo at eye level. Private labels saw the opportunity and sprinted. When a national brand pioneers an organic granola at $5.99, a retailer's own brand arrives at $4.49 with similar cues and a seal in the corner. Multiply that across sauces, broths, snacks, baby food. Category by category, store brands captured the look, copied the claims, and undercut the price. That sucked margin out of branded players and pushed sourcing pressure upstream. To meet weekly pose at scale, buyers needed volume from certifiers willing to move fast. Organic but cheaper sounds like a win for shoppers. In procurement, it can mean collapsing buffers that kept fraud at bay. Retailers added their own in-house standards. Extra checklists printed on glossy brochures, no artificial preservatives, no synthetic colors, clean ingredients. The effect was a curated moral map for the store. In practice, supply constraints forced exceptions. A retailer might require organic cane sugar but allow non-organic lecithin if the organic version is short. They might ban a certain preservative but allow a functionally similar processing aid that doesn't need to be labeled. The standards read simple. The sourcing reads like triage. When the shelf is empty, rules bend quietly to keep velocity up. Where the halo meets the courtroom, the language gets careful. All natural lawsuits surged when consumers learned natural flavors weren't strawberries in a blender. Some cases forced payouts, many pushed brands to tweak phrases. Simple ingredients, no fake stuff, nothing artificial. Judges frequently asked, would a reasonable consumer be misled? Courts didn't redraw the term, they arbitrated misunderstandings case by case. Settlements bought time and taught copywriters new synonyms. The formulas often stayed the same. Meanwhile, the human math rarely adds up like the ads imply. Micro-story. A family in Phoenix cuts their grocery bill in half by ditching takeout, then spends the savings on organic versions of their staples, cereal, snack bars, yogurt tubes, veggie chips. 2 months in, nothing feels different. The dad says his energy's the same. The mom's migraines haven't shifted. Their kid still bounces off the walls after soccer. They thought organic would move the needle. Their cart was still 80% ultra-processed, just with better sourcing and friendlier fonts. The premium paid for upstream farming practices, not a different metabolic destiny. This is where lawsuits and expectations collide. When a natural soda faces a class action because it contains citric acid produced via fermentation, the legal question isn't health, it's semantics. When an organic cookie gets dragged for containing too much sugar, the court looks at compliance, not nutrition. Whether a brand settles or fights, the outcome rarely changes the category. A new tagline appears. The halo endures. Margins tell their own story. In earnings calls, companies point to mix, selling more premium items that lift average price. The mix story works when consumers believe the premium has substance. The risk is a trust cycle. One headline about a fraudulent organic grain shipment, one investigation into flavor chemistry behind a natural label, and shoppers hesitate. Retailers respond by doubling down on curated seals and end cap experiences. Farms stand displays inside fluorescent aisles. It keeps the story close and the questions far. Sourcing pressure is the silent squeeze behind the halo. Private label growth means bigger, cheaper orders. Cheaper orders require scale. Scale pulls supply from further away. Long chains increase opacity. A broker who was optional 5 years ago becomes essential. Paper trails stretch. Audits lag. The halo's brightness at the shelf is inversely related to the shadows in the chain. You can see it in small moments. A buyer asking if a supplier can meet cost targets without losing the seal. A supplier asking a certifier if a substitute emulsifier is functionally equivalent for their organic line. Or why does the halo survive? Because it still signals a set of values most people want to support. It's easier to buy better than to cook differently. It feels rational to pay the toll at the register rather than spend time decoding processing levels and ingredient lists. And to be fair, some of that money does support better practices on farms. But when the halo stretches over an ultra-processed product, you're mostly financing a story architecture. Design, placement claims that comfort. The farm is in there somewhere. So are the vats, the sprays, the steam-injected tunnels that make crispy things stay crispy. The premium doesn't vanish on its own. It unravels when expectations meet outcomes.